On the night of their silver anniversary, Victor Hughes handed Lorraine Hughes' divorce papers instead of a gift. 25 years is enough, Victor Hughes announced calmly in front of a ballroom filled with friends, coworkers, and family. I want a younger life now, and I need you out of the condo by tomorrow. For a few seconds, nobody moved, not even Lorraine. What Victor conveniently forgot was that the condo had originally been gifted to Lorraine by her parents long before the marriage. And his mother, Evelyn Hughes, sat there with the faintest smile on her face, watching the entire thing unfold like she had been waiting years for that moment. Lorraine stood up slowly, walked toward him, took the microphone from his hand, and said something that wiped the confidence right off his face. But honestly, the story didn't begin in that ballroom. It started weeks earlier. One night, Lorraine woke to the sound of low voices drifting through the hallway outside their bedroom. Victor was on the phone again. It was nearly 3 in the morning. She stayed perfectly still beneath the blankets, while his voice carried softly through the crack under the door. Excitement. The nervous kind. We need to handle this carefully, Victor whispered. She can't suspect anything. Of course she won't. Evelyn replied smoothly on the other end. Lorraine's stomach tightened instantly. The sound of Victor lowering his voice made Lorraine's skin tighten beneath the blankets. What exactly were they planning? And why now? Only weeks before their 25th anniversary. A moment later, the hardwood floor creaked softly as Victor walked back toward the bedroom. Lorraine closed her eyes immediately. He slipped carefully into bed beside her, but his body felt tense and restless, almost vibrating with anticipation. The next morning felt even worse. Victor was suddenly attentive in a way that didn't feel natural anymore. Maybe some of you already know that feeling when something hasn't happened yet, but deep down you can feel your life quietly starting to change. And before we go any further, tell me where you were listening from tonight, because at that point, she still had no idea how far Victor had already gone. Morning, sweetheart, he said warmly, leaning down to kiss her cheek. Expensive cologne clung to his jacket. How about we finally pick the restaurant for the anniversary tonight? I want everything perfect this year. Perfect. The word lingered unpleasantly in Lorraine's mind. In 25 years of marriage, Victor had never once cared this much about planning a celebration. Usually she handled everything, while he criticized details afterward. Sure, she answered carefully. As he hurried around the bedroom getting ready for work, his phone lit up on the nightstand beside her. A notification appeared on the screen. Call V11300 AM. Lorraine tried to sound casual as she watered the plants near the window. Who said? The coffee machine hummed softly in the kitchen, while the phone screen kept glowing between them. Victor turned around too fast. For one brief second, panic crossed his face before he forced himself to relax again. Vanna Vargas, he said quickly, a consultant from Seattle. Just work stuff a lie. Lorraine knew her husband too well. Whenever Victor lied, his right eye twitched slightly near the corner. It was twitching now. I see, she replied softly. But something cold settled deep inside her chest. After he left, Lorraine remained standing by the window, staring out at the gray October sky, hanging over Bellevue District. 25 years, a quarter of a century. They had met in college. Lorraine had been studying accounting, serious and disciplined even back then. Victor was ambitious, charming, the kind of man who always seemed destined for bigger things. They married young because they genuinely loved each other. At least she believed they did. They dreamed about children, a noisy house, holidays packed with family. But the children never came. Doctors never found a clear reason. Year after year passed, and eventually the silence inside the house became something permanent. Victor hit harder than Lorraine realized at the time. Especially once Evelyn started slipping passive-aggressive comments into family dinners about grandchildren and continuing the family line. Eventually, they stopped talking about it. They focused on work instead. Travel, promotions, investments. From the outside, they looked stable. But somewhere along the way, Something essential between them had quietly disappeared. A sharp knock at the door pulled Lorraine out of her thoughts. Evelyn Hughes stood outside, wearing her usual polished smile. "Lorraine, dear," she said as she walked into the condo, without waiting to be invited inside. "How are you getting everything ready for the anniversary?" Evelyn always spoke with exaggerated politeness. Too polite. The kind that created distance instead of warmth. In 25 years, she had never once truly treated Lorraine like family. "We were getting there," Lorraine answered, leading her toward the living room. "Victor wants to do something big this year. At a hotel." "Oh, good," Evelyn said approvingly. "A proper venue? Important occasions deserve an audience. Doing it quietly at home never sends the right message." As she spoke, her eyes slowly moved around the condo, evaluating, comparing. Lorraine knew that look well. Evelyn never openly criticized the condo, but somehow Lorraine always left those conversations feeling reminded that Evelyn's suburban mansion was larger, newer, and more expensive. "By the way," Evelyn added casually as she settled into the armchair, "I've been thinking about the future lately. Victor isn't too young anymore. 67 already. And without children." She paused delicately. "Perhaps it's time to think about a will." Lorraine looked at her carefully. "A will for whom?" "Well," Evelyn said with a dismissive wave, "my nephews, fine naturally. Good boys. Responsible boys. If these things aren't arranged properly, the government takes everything." A chill ran through Lorraine. Until that moment, Lorraine still wanted to believe she was overthinking everything. Then Evelyn asked the question that changed everything. "And where do you keep the condo paperwork?" The words were delivered lightly, almost carelessly. But Lorraine instantly heard the meaning underneath them. "I am only thinking ahead," Evelyn continued smoothly. "Young people need security." There it was. Lorraine slowly set her teacup down. "They relocked in the safe," she said evenly. "Why?" "Oh, no reason. It's simply smart to know where important things are." After Evelyn finally left, Lorraine sat alone in silence. The late-night phone call. Victor's sudden affection. Find the strange interest in legal paperwork. Little by little, the pieces began fitting together into something ugly. Without fully realizing why, Lorraine walked into Victor's office and turned on his computer. Fine, for years he had always used the same password the date they first met. This time it didn't work. Her pulse immediately quickened. Victor had never hidden passwords from her before. She tried his birthday. Nothing. Evelyn's birthday. Still nothing. Then she tried their wedding date backward. The screen unlocked. Lorraine stared at the browser history as her stomach slowly dropped. How to protect assets during divorce. Property division rights. Ways to retain marital property after separation. Legal strategies for contested divorce settlements. Page after page after page. Victor had been researching all of it for weeks. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled further. How to keep the condo after divorce. Methods to reduce spousal claims. Legal loopholes in property division. Then her phone rang suddenly, making her jump. It was Helen Brooks. "Lorraine," Helen said immediately, "you are not going to believe what I just saw." Lorraine's grip tightened around the phone. "What happened?" "I saw Victor at Pacific Crest Mall," Helen said carefully. "At the jewelry store. And he wasn't alone. I saw him with a younger woman. Blondie, very polished. Expensive coat, perfect hair, the whole picture. They were looking at rings." Lorraine's chest tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "What did she look like exactly?" "Maybe 34, Helen answered. "Pretty, but in that very calculated way. And honestly, they weren't even trying to hide it. She was hanging on to him the entire time." A pause followed. "Lorraine, are you okay?" "Yes," Lorraine lied softly. "I'm fine." But she wasn't not even close. That evening, Victor came home carrying roses and an overpriced box of chocolate truffles, like a man auditioning to be husband of the year. "For my one true love," he said smoothly before kissing her. One true love. The irony almost made her sick. Lorraine studied him carefully for a moment, then finally said, "Victor, we need to have a serious conversation about our future." His shoulders tightened almost instantly. Tiny reaction. Barely noticeable. But she caught it. About what? Fine, he asked casually, reaching for the TV remote. Everything is fine, isn't it? The anniversary is next week. Our friends are coming. Let's not ruin the mood with heavy conversations. Then he added quietly, we'll talk after the party. After the party. The words settled heavily in Lorraine's stomach. Something was planned for that night. Something deliberate. She nodded as if she accepted the answer, but inside, a cold certainty was beginning to form. After 25 years, she knew Victor well enough to recognize calculation when she saw it. He was preparing something quietly, carefully, and Evelyn was involved, probably a lawyer too. What Victor didn't realize was that Lorraine already had something he wasn't expecting, something that could destroy every plan he had built behind her back. For now, she kept that to herself. The next morning, Lorraine woke with the strange numbness people feel after tragedy, like her mind was still trying to catch up with reality. Victor left early. Ivy got a meeting, he announced while grabbing his coat. A meeting. Lorraine almost laughed bitterly. She knew exactly who he was meeting. Around 11 that morning, the house phone rang. Victor had forgotten his cell phone in the kitchen again, face down near the coffee machine. Fine, Lorraine let the call go to voicemail. A second later, Evelyn's voice filled the quiet condo. Victor, it's Mom. I spoke to Robert Calloway. Everything can be arranged. The important thing is that Lorraine suspects absolutely nothing until the very end. Call me back. Robert Calloway. So that was the Seattle consultant. Not a consultant. A divorce attorney. Lorraine stood frozen beside the counter. 25 years beside a man who was organizing the collapse of their marriage with the same emotional detachment as scheduling a business meeting. Slowly, she picked up Victor's phone. 6-digit passcode. She tried the date they first met. Didn't he work? Evelyn's birthday. Still nothing. Then her thoughts drifted back to the blonde woman at the jewelry store. Fine. Without fully knowing why, Lorraine entered March 8th. The screen unlocked immediately. Her stomach dropped. Vanessa. And the moment the screen opened, Lorraine already knew her marriage was over. The messages were all there. Vanessa, I'm tired of hiding. You promised we'd be together by New Year as Victor. Just a little longer, sweetheart. After the anniversary, everything will finally be ours. Ours. Her tea had already gone cold beside the sink. Lorraine sat down slowly at the kitchen table as her hands began to shake. Victor. Mom already handled most of it. Lorraine suspects nothing. Victor. Calloway says if we play this carefully, she'll only walk away with part of the assets. I'll keep the condo. The condo. Her parents' condo. The messages continued. Victor asking Evelyn whether the property title gave him enough leverage. Evelyn reassuring him that there are ways. Then the line that made Lorraine's blood run cold. If she refuses to sign, she won't have a choice after what happens at the anniversary. Lorraine stared at the screen. What exactly were they planning to do to her in front of everyone? Humiliate her. Accuse her of something. Break her emotionally, so she would sign whatever they placed in front of her. The realization hit harder than the affair itself. This wasn't impulsive betrayal. This was organized. Careful, strategic Victor. Evelyn, Vanessa, and now a lawyer. All working together while she sat in that condo believing she still had a marriage. Without wasting another second, fine, Lorraine forwarded every important message to herself, erased the traces, and carefully returned the phone exactly where she found it. Fine, then she sat in silence for several minutes. She needed a plan. More importantly, she needed someone she could trust. Victor thought Lorraine still had nowhere to go, so she called Diane Mercer, college friend, family attorney. Fine. One of the few people Lorraine still believed would tell her the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Lorraine. Diane answered warmly. Wow, it's been forever. Can we meet today? Lorraine asked quietly. I need legal advice. Diane immediately heard something in her tone. Of course. 6 o'clock. Come by my office. Fine. Diana's office sat high above downtown Seattle inside, a modern glass tower overlooking the water. The moment Lorraine walked in, Diane hugged her tightly, then pulled back with concern already written across her face. What happened? Fine. Lorraine sat down slowly. At first I thought maybe I was imagining things, she admitted. But I am not. She tried framing it like a hypothetical situation at first. A woman discovers her husband is secretly planning a divorce, she said carefully. And it looks like he is setting her up somehow. Diane leaned back in her chair, studying her. Is this woman you? Lorraine stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then everything came out. The late-night phone calls, Vanessa, the messages, Evelyn's involvement, the lawyer, the anniversary party. Diane listened without interrupting, only stopping occasionally to ask precise questions. When Lorraine finally finished, the office fell silent. This is serious, Diane said at last. But listen to me carefully, you are not powerless here. The good news is you found out before they acted. She opened a legal pad. Tell me about the condo. When was it purchased? 2005, Lorraine answered. Both names are on the paperwork. And your employment. I'm controller at Northbridge Holdings. 15 years. Other shared assets. A small lake cabin. But the condo is the main thing. Diane wrote several notes, then looked directly at her. Lorraine, if you stay calm, they cannot force you into anything. But this absolutely sounds like a coordinated pressure strategy. Public humiliation, emotional shock. They want you overwhelmed enough to sign documents without thinking clearly. Lorraine swallowed hard. Fine, so what do I do? First, gather evidence. Save every message. Record conversations if possible. Move some money into an account only you control. Then Diane's expression sharpened. Fine, and most importantly, do not let Victor know you already understand the game he is playing. For the first time in days, Lorraine felt something shift inside her. Not relief exactly, but stability. A direction, a plan, and suddenly, she no longer felt completely alone. How much do I owe you? Lorraine asked quietly as she stood to leave. Diane smiled and shook her head. Nothing. Friends donned to charge each other for survival advice. Then her expression softened. And Lorraine, whatever happens next, remember this, you are not helpless. Those words stayed with Lorraine the entire drive home. For the first time since discovering Victor's betrayal, she felt something steadier than panic, resolve. But the moment she stepped into the condo, she realized the emotional manipulation had already started. Victor stood near the hallway mirror adjusting his tie. Without fully looking at her, he said casually, "You look tired lately?" Lorraine paused. Victor continued in that fake, concerned tone people use when they want to hurt someone politely. I am not trying to be mean, but you've kind of let yourself go a little. 63 isn't told anymore. Women take care of themselves now. Fitness, skincare, all that. He glanced at her reflection. I saw Helen Brooks' niece today. She's 34, but honestly looks 28. Very polished. Then came the pause, and there it was. Not an insult exactly, something colder. A comparison. A quiet justification for what he was about to do. Lorraine simply set her purse down. I see. Victor moved on quickly, almost relieved she hadn't reacted. I've got meetings tomorrow, he announced. Even Saturday. Another day with Vanessa Cole? That's fine, Lorraine replied evenly. And Sunday I'm helping Mom set up her new TV? Of course he was. The three of them already sounded like a family. That night, while Victor showered upstairs, Lorraine logged into their joint account. The numbers made her stomach tighten. Fine. Nearly $68,000 had disappeared over the past few weeks through scattered withdrawals and transfers, jewelry purchases, luxury hotel charges, payments tied to Robert Calloway's office, and likely gifts for Vanessa. Their shared money. Money Lorraine had spent years helping build. She let out a dry laugh under her breath. They were funding the destruction of her marriage with her own accounts. But unlike Victor, Lorraine now had something they knew nothing about. A week earlier, a registered letter had arrived from the British consular office. Her aunt, Margaret Ellison, her father's older sister, had passed away in Scotland. Margaret had never married or had children. And she had left everything to Lorraine, an Edinburgh penthouse worth around $1.1 million. A luxury condo in Scottsdale valued near $950,000, and over $20,000 in cash accounts. Lorraine read the numbers twice, just to make sure she wasn't imagining them. More than $4.2 million total. Originally, Lorraine had planned to surprise Victor with the inheritance during their anniversary trip. Now it meant something entirely different. Security. Independence. A future Victor could no longer control. She spent half the night researching inheritance transfers, private asset protection, fine, and how to legally separate inherited funds before divorce proceedings could begin. Victor thought he still controlled the situation. He realize the balance had already shifted. Monday morning, Lorraine woke with complete clarity. Her first stop wasn't at the probate office handling Margaret's estate. Instead, she drove downtown to meet Edward Langford, the real estate attorney who had handled the condo purchase years earlier. Edward greeted her warmly. "Lorraine Hughes," he said with a smile. "It's been a long time. How are you?" "And Victor?" Lorraine closed the office door behind her. "I need your help," she said quietly. "And I need complete confidentiality." Edward's expression immediately changed. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me what's going on." Lorraine explained that she needed clarification regarding the original ownership of their condo on Willow Creek Avenue. Edward disappeared into the records room and returned several minutes later, carrying an old file. "I remember this transaction," he said slowly. "It was unusual." He opened the paperwork. "The purchase funds came directly from your parents' account. Fine, according to the original gift documents. You were listed as the sole beneficiary before Victor's name was ever added." Fine warmth spread through Lorraine's chest for the first time in days. "So legally." Edward nodded. "Yes." "The property began as a gifted premarital asset. Victor was added later because you were already married. In a divorce, that distinction matters." Lorraine stayed still. Could he still claim part of it? "Only if he proves major financial contributions toward renovations or improvements." A faint smile touched her lips. Victor had never invested anything meaningful into that condo. She had handled nearly everything herself. "Fine, could you prepare official confirmation documents for me?" "Absolutely. Come back tomorrow afternoon." When Lorraine left Edward's office, the city looked different somehow. For days, she had felt hunted. Now, for the first time, she felt protected. But another shock was waiting at home. A courier package sat in the lobby. Final inheritance documentation from Scotland. Lorraine carried the thick envelope upstairs with trembling hands. Inside were the finalized estate papers, the Edinburgh penthouse, the Scottsdale condo, the cash accounts, over $4.2 million total. She sat quietly staring at the numbers. In just a few weeks, her life had completely changed. She was no longer trapped, no longer financially dependent, no longer powerless. But Victor could not know that. Not yet. Her phone rang. Victor. His voice sounded strangely cheerful. "Lorraine, I had an idea," he said. "Fine, what if we make the anniversary really special this year? Big celebration. Friends, coworkers, everyone." Lorraine leaned back slowly. "Why suddenly make such a big production out of it?" "It's 25 years," Victor replied smoothly. "I want people to see what a strong marriage looks like." At another time, she might have believed him. "I already booked the ballroom at the Grand Crescent Hotel. 100 guests." That was the moment Lorraine fully understood how carefully Victor had planned the humiliation. 100 witnesses. 100 people for whatever humiliation he had planned. "That sounds expensive," Lorraine said carefully. "We talked about cutting back." "Done." Worry about the money," he interrupted. "The important thing is making the right impression." Impression? The word stayed with her after the call ended. Later that afternoon, Evelyn Hughes arrived carrying a cream-colored envelope tied with a ribbon. "Lorraine, dear," she said sweetly. "A little gift?" Inside was a business card. Callaway Legal Group, family law, divorce, asset division. On a handwritten note sat underneath. "Complimentary consultation available anytime." Lorraine stared at it for a moment. The arrogance was unbelievable. They were literally handing her the contact information for the lawyer, helping organize her divorce. How thoughtful, Lorraine said evenly. Evelyn smiled warmly. I only worry about your future daughter. Father. Lorraine almost froze when Evelyn said it. In 25 years, her mother-in-law had never once called her that. Not once. And now, suddenly, while quietly helping destroy her marriage, Evelyn wanted to sound warm and caring. Fine. After she left, Lorraine began straightening the living room just to keep her hands busy. As she picked up one of Victor's jackets, something slipped from the pocket and landed near her feet. A business card. Robert Calloway. Family law. Divorce, asset division. The same lawyer, the same plan. Everything connected. Victor came home late, that evening smelling faintly of expensive perfume and confidence. He wrapped an arm around her casually. Fine, everything's ready, he said. The menu, the guests, the ballroom. It's going to be unforgettable. Lorraine looked at him quietly. For once, he was telling the truth. The night would absolutely be unforgettable. Just not in the way he expected. Victor, she asked softly, what cologne is that? It's not yours. A tiny hesitation crossed his face. Oh, elevator perfume, he replied smoothly. One of the neighbors wears too much of it. It got on my jacket. Another easy lie. Then he glanced toward the window. I'm planning a special speech for the anniversary. Something about our future. Our future. Lorraine repeated carefully. Victor smiled faintly. It'll be a surprise. The word settled coldly in her chest. That night, Lorraine barely slept. Around 2 in the morning, she heard Victor speaking quietly in the hallway again. She slipped from bed and moved silently toward the door. Everything's ready, Victor whispered into the phone. Ballroom booked. Guests confirmed. After the toast, it'll happen naturally. Evelyn's voice answered softly. You reassure Lorraine suspects nothing. How would she? Victor said with quiet amusement. She still trusts me completely. Lorraine closed her eyes. That hurt more than the affair. And if she refuses to sign afterward, Victor continued, she'll sign once everyone hears the truth. Lorraine's pulse tightened. She want to make a scene in front of people. She'll go home quietly, and Robert Calloway will already be waiting there with the paperwork. Fast. Clean. No drama. Evelyn hesitated. Fine, wouldn't it be easier to do this privately? No, Victor replied immediately. It needs to happen publicly. That way she won't have time to argue or think clearly. Then came the part that made Lorraine's stomach turn. Vanessa Cole already knows everything. She's coming tomorrow too. I'm introducing her as my new marketing assistant. Evelyn lowered her voice. That's cruel. No, Victor said coldly. It's practical. 25 years is enough. I deserve to be happy too, even if it destroyed her. Lorraine returned to bed afterward, but sleep never came. So that was the plan. Humiliate her publicly. Pressure her emotionally. Push her into signing everything. And Vanessa would be there to watch it happen before stepping into Lorraine's place beside Victor. At least, that was what they believed. The next morning, Lorraine went straight to the bank. She opened a private account and quietly transferred half of their joint savings. If Victor wanted to keep spending money on Vanessa, he could use his own half. Afterward, Lorraine picked up the official paperwork Edward Langford had prepared confirming the condo on Willow Creek Avenue had originally been gifted to her before the marriage. Then she drove to work. Charles Bennett looked up immediately when she entered his office. Lorraine, everything okay? For now, she answered calmly. But I may be dealing with a difficult personal situation soon. Charles frowned. A divorce. She nodded once. He looked genuinely surprised. I thought you and Victor were solid. Fine, you just invited everyone to your anniversary. That's exactly why I wanted to warn you, Lorraine replied. Whatever happens personally, it won't affect my work. Charles leaned back slowly. Lorraine, you're one of the best financial controllers this company has ever had. Your job is safe. For the first time in days, Lorraine felt something steadier than fear. That evening, while Vic disappeared into another meeting, Lorraine spread the inheritance papers across the dining table. The Scottsdale condo was empty now. The previous tenant had moved out weeks earlier. If necessary, Lorraine could leave Seattle immediately after the divorce. The Scottish accounts guaranteed financial independence for years. And most importantly, Victor still had no idea the Bellevue condo was legally protected from him. Tomorrow was the anniversary. Victor thought he was preparing the final move. In reality, he was walking directly into the collapse of his own plan. Lorraine locked the documents carefully inside the safe and allowed herself the smallest smile. The next morning, she visited the British consular office to finalize the inheritance process. An older official reviewed the paperwork carefully before nodding. "Everything is in excellent order, Mrs. Hughes. Your aunt was extremely organized." He handed the documents back to her. "The cash accounts should be accessible within the week, and ownership of the Scottsdale property transfers immediately." Lorraine slipped the papers carefully into her bag. 3 properties, hundreds of thousands in liquid assets, and something even more valuable than money: freedom. Later that afternoon, she opened a separate international account for the overseas transfer. The young advisor helping her glanced at the estate figures with wide eyes. "You inherited quite a fortune." Lorraine smiled faintly. "My Aunt Margaret was an extraordinary woman." When she stepped outside afterward, the air itself felt lighter. For the first time in years, she no longer felt trapped inside the life Victor had built around her. What he planned for the anniversary no longer frightened her. But outside the Grand Crescent Hotel, another surprise was waiting. A tall, blonde woman in an ivory coat stood near the entrance talking excitedly on the phone. "Victor, my love, the ballroom is incredible," the woman laughed. "You promised we'd be living in that condo soon." "Fine, honestly. I can already picture our parties there." Lorraine stopped walking instantly. Vanessa Cole, her husband's mistress, only a few feet away. Lorraine studied her quietly. Vanessa was beautiful in the polished, expensive way Victor admired. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect posture. But there was something cold behind her eyes, something calculating. "And I'll finally be there as your new marketing assistant," Vanessa said with a soft laugh. "Honestly, this whole thing feels kind of romantic in a strange way." Romantic. That was the word she used for publicly humiliating another woman. After 25 years of marriage, Lorraine slowly walked closer. "Excuse me," she asked politely. "Do you know where I can find the event manager?" Vanessa looked her over with immediate disinterest. "No idea," she replied coolly. "I done tea work here." Then she lifted the phone back to her ear. "Victor, there's some woman here asking me questions." A faint smile touched Lorraine's lips. Some woman. Tomorrow, that some woman was going to destroy every plan they thought they controlled. A few minutes later, the hotel manager greeted Lorraine warmly and guided her toward the ballroom. "You rehear about tomorrow's anniversary, correct? Mr. Hughes finalized everything earlier this week." "How much did the event cost?" Lorraine asked casually. The manager checked the file. "A little over $62,000. Ballroom, catering, live music, premium service package." $62,000. To publicly humiliate his wife. Lorraine nodded slowly. "Could I see the ballroom?" "Of course." The room was stunning. Crystal chandeliers reflected against mirrored walls. White linen covered every table, and from almost every angle, guests would have a clear view of the center stage. Fine, of course they would. "And where will the microphone be during the speeches?" Lorraine asked. "Right in the center," the manager explained. Mr. Hughes specifically requested full visibility and audio coverage. Naturally, Victor wanted every guest to hear her humiliation clearly. When Lorraine returned home, Victor was pacing near the kitchen, holding a folded piece of paper. The second he saw her, he shoved it into his pocket. "Oh, Lorraine," he said quickly. "We're at the hotel checking the arrangements." "And very impressive," she replied evenly. $62,000 for one night. Victor dismissed it immediately. "It's our silver anniversary. It matters." "Important to who?" Lorraine thought quietly. Later that evening, Evelyn Hughes arrived looking almost excited. "Victor, are you ready?" she asked. Did you practice your speech? Of course, he answered confidently. Everything's under control. Evelyn squeezed his shoulder proudly. Everyone will finally understand you made the right decision. The right decision? Lorraine stood silently in the kitchen while anger slowly built beneath her calm expression. Then Victor lowered his voice. What if she causes a scene? She won tea. Evelyn replied confidently. Not in front of that many people. Lorraine is too controlled for that. And Robert Calloway. Paperwork is ready, Evelyn said. After the speech, she'll sign. Lorraine quietly walked to the bedroom afterward and opened her drawer. Inside sat her own folder. Everything prepared? The documents proving the condo on Willow Creek Avenue belonged to her before the marriage. Find the inheritance paperwork from Scotland. Statements from her private accounts. Tomorrow, those papers would change everything. Later that night, after Evelyn finally left, Victor locked himself inside his office. As Lorraine passed the door, she heard him rehearsing softly. Dear friends, 25 years ago, I made a decision I believed was right. But people change. Life changes. And sometimes honesty means admitting when something no longer works. Lorraine stopped outside the door. Something no longer works. That was how he planned to describe 25 years of marriage. Victor continued, I'll always appreciate Lorraine for the years we shared, but we want different things now, different futures. The rest became muffled, but she already understood where the speech was going. Lorraine returned quietly to the bedroom. Sleep never came. The next morning, Victor woke in unusually good spirits. Big day today, he said while adjusting his tie. Yes, Lorraine answered calmly. Our anniversary. Victor smiled strangely. Not just that. By tomorrow, both our lives will be completely different. Lorraine studied him for a moment. Victor, can I ask you something? Sure. Did you ever really love me? His hands paused briefly against the tie. That's a strange question for today. I'm still asking. Victor avoided her eyes. Of course I loved you, he said carefully. And I still care about you. In my own way. In his own way. Like someone speaking about a life he had already emotionally abandoned. I understand, Lorraine said softly. Throughout the day, Victor barely stopped moving. Phone calls. Guest confirmations. Last-minute instructions to the hotel. By evening, his nervous energy had become impossible to hide. Ready? He asked as Lorraine stepped into the hallway. She wore a dark blue dress she had bought specifically for that night. Elegant. Controlled. Ready, she answered. Victor grabbed his keys. Good, it says finally time for the truth. Lorraine picked up her purse, feeling the weight of the documents inside. Yes, she replied quietly. I think it is. Fine, the drive to the Grand Crescent Hotel passed, almost entirely in silence. Victor tapped his fingers against the steering wheel while Lorraine watched the city lights pass outside the window. 25 years earlier, they had driven together in silence too. But back then, the silence had been filled with excitement, hope, love. Tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the quiet before impact. As they stepped beneath the glowing hotel lights, Victor looked at her carefully. No matter what happens tonight, he said, I truly wish you the best. Fine, Lorraine almost smiled at the cruelty hidden inside those words. Thank you, Victor, she replied calmly, and I hope you receive exactly what you deserve. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold candlelight and white roses. Nearly 100 guests filled the tables. Lorraine smiled politely, accepted congratulations, and thanked people for coming. But inside, the tension kept building. The moment was closed now. Lorraine, you look beautiful tonight, Rachel Foster said warmly. 25 years together? That's incredible. Lorraine glanced across the ballroom. Yes, she said softly. Unexpected too. And standing near the far corner of the room was Vanessa Cole, Victor's mistress, introduced to everyone as his new marketing assistant. Young, beautiful, completely certain she was about to inherit Lorraine's life. Vanessa stood near the back of the ballroom in an elegant designer dress, speaking comfortably with several coworkers, as if nothing about the evening was inappropriate. like she already belonged there. Victor Hughes, congratulations, Charles Bennett said warmly as he shook Victor's hand. 25 years together is rare these days. Thank you, Charles, Victor replied smoothly. Tonight means a lot to me. I actually prepared a special speech. A speech? Lorraine felt her throat tighten slightly. Across the ballroom, Evelyn Hughes moved from table to table accepting compliments, like a proud mother watching her son succeed at something important. Her satisfaction was impossible to miss. She knew exactly what was coming. Near the back corner of the room sat a serious-looking man in a dark suit, late 50s. Quiet, watching everything carefully. Lorraine recognized him immediately from the photo Diane Mercer had shown her earlier. Robert Calloway, the divorce attorney. He was there to finalize paperwork. The second Victor finished humiliating her. Then the master of ceremonies stepped toward the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Victor Hughes would like to say a few words in honor of his wife. Even the sound of silverware against plates gradually disappeared. The ballroom slowly fell silent. Victor stood, adjusted his jacket, and smiled confidently as he took the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began warmly. 25 years is a long time. A quarter of a century beside one person. Several guests smiled and raised their glasses. Victor continued. Over the past year, Ivy spent a lot of time reflecting on life, on marriage, on whether people truly remain the same forever. Lorraine felt her pulse quicken. It was starting. And I realized something difficult. Victor said, people change. What feels right when you were young doesn't always remain right later in life. Confused looks began spreading around the ballroom. 25 years ago, I made choices based on emotion, Victor continued. But eventually life teaches you to see things more honestly. Victor, Lorraine said quietly from her seat. What are you doing? The truth, he answered calmly. For once. Then his voice hardened. For 25 years, I stayed in a marriage with someone who was never truly right for me. A woman who no longer fits the future I want. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. Someone near the back whispered, "What the hell is happening?" Victor ignored them. "Our marriage is over," he announced clearly. "I'm filing for divorce." Silence spread across the ballroom. Several guests looked visibly uncomfortable. Others stared at Lorraine in disbelief. Only Evelyn looked pleased. Victor kept going, growing more confident with every second. "I want a fair division of assets, and Lorraine will, of course, move out of the condo so both of us can move forward respectfully." As he spoke, his eyes drifted toward Vanessa. She stood near the back of the room, pretending to look uncomfortable, though the satisfaction on her face was impossible to hide. "Victor, are you serious?" Charles Bennett asked sharply. "You redoing this here?" "I have every right to pursue happiness," Victor replied coldly. "And yes, Vanessa understands me in ways Lorraine never did." That was enough. Lorraine rose slowly from her chair and walked toward him. The ballroom watched in complete silence. Victor looked almost relieved, as if he was already preparing himself for tears. Instead, Lorraine gently took the microphone from his hand. "Thank you, Victor," she said softly. That was very honest. The room grew even quieter. "And actually," Lorraine continued calmly, "you rewrite about one thing. It's probably time the truth came out." Victor's expression shifted slightly. This was not part of his plan. "I've known about Vanessa for 3 weeks," Lorraine said evenly. "I also know about Robert Calloway, sitting in the back corner tonight, fine, waiting with divorce paperwork." Every head in the ballroom turned toward the attorney. Robert immediately looked uncomfortable. "Fine. And I know about the plan to pressure me into signing away rights to the condo after publicly humiliating me tonight." Victor's face lost color. "Lorraine." "No," she interrupted quietly. "You've spoken long enough." Then she opened the folder inside her purse. "You made one very important mistake, Victor. The condo on Willow Creek Avenue was originally gifted to me by my parents before our marriage. Legally, it began as my separate property." Victor stared at her. "That's impossible." "It isn't," Lorraine replied calmly. "I already confirmed everything with Edward Langford. the attorney who handled the original transaction. The room had become completely silent now. And there's something else you done, Tino? Lorraine continued. 3 weeks ago, my Aunt Margaret Ellison passed away in Scotland. Vanessa's confident expression began fading. Fine, she left me an estate worth more than $4.2 million. An Edinburgh penthouse. A Scottsdale investment property. Cash accounts. No one moved. No one spoke. So I'm curious, Lorraine said softly, looking directly at Victor. What exactly are you planning to divide? Victor looked like he could barely breathe. You'll receive half the lake cabin, Lorraine continued, and half the value of your car. Everything else belongs to me. Across the ballroom, Vanessa slowly leaned against the wall, visibly shaken. And here's the part I find most interesting, Lorraine added. Do you know how much Victor spent preparing tonight's little performance? She looked around the room. Over $62,000 from our shared accounts. Outrage immediately spread through the crowd. People began whispering to each other openly now. But honestly, Lorraine said calmly, I'm not interested in revenge. Victor is free to pursue whatever future he thinks will make him happy. Then she glanced toward Vanessa. Fine, you're both free to leave together. Just not to my condo. Lorraine, wait, Victor said quietly. We can talk about this. There's nothing left to discuss. Her voice never rose. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. And Robert Calloway is no longer necessary. In that moment, Victor finally realized he had misjudged Lorraine completely. And honestly, after 25 years together, would most people walk away quietly from that kind of humiliation, or finally tell the truth in front of everyone? Keep watching, because the night was far from over. Then Lorraine turned toward the guests. I am sorry your evening became something unpleasant, she said. But sometimes the truth matters more than appearances. She gently placed the microphone back onto the table. Then she walked toward the ballroom exit. Behind her, the room finally exploded. Victor, what is wrong with you? Someone shouted. You humiliate your wife after 25 years. This is disgusting. Vanessa tried slipping quietly toward the side exit, but several furious guests stopped her almost immediately. And you? One woman snapped. You thought this was glamorous. What kind of person participates in something like this? While Lorraine stepped out into the cool night air, the ballroom behind her was collapsing. She paused near the entrance and glanced back through the tall glass windows. Victor stood in the center of the room looking pale and completely lost, like a man watching months of careful planning fall apart in real time. Guests surrounded him from every direction. Voices overlapped. Questions? Accusations? The microphone still lay abandoned on the floor. Charles Bennett approached him first, his expression filled with disgust. Victor Hughes, I am deeply disappointed in you, he said sharply. After tonight, I think we need to seriously reconsider your future at Northbridge Holdings. Victor immediately shook his head. Charles, you don't understand. Lorraine twisted everything. Twisted? Rachel Foster interrupted. We all heard you. You humiliated your wife in front of 100 people. Across the ballroom, another disaster was unfolding. Vanessa Cole pushed through the crowd toward Victor, panic finally replacing her earlier confidence. Victor, she hissed, grabbing his sleeve. What is happening? You promised me that condo. Not now, Victor muttered nervously. We'll talk later. Later, Vanessa snapped. I waited 3 months for this. You told me we'd be living together by New Year's. Several nearby guests turned immediately. Some had already started recording on their phones. Vanessa? Stop, Victor whispered desperately. But she was too angry now. No, she shot back. Maybe everyone deserves to hear the truth. The ballroom quieted again. This man promised me money, luxury, a condo downtown, Vanessa said bitterly. He bought me jewelry using money from his wife's accounts. Victor's face lost what little color remained. Vanessa. And he took out loans too, she continued recklessly. 20,000 from Harbor National Bank. Another 15 from Summit Federal. Hidden from Lorraine the entire time. Even Lorraine hadn't known about the loans. Across the room, Evelyn Hughes rushed forward in shock. Victor, she demanded, what is she talking about? Loans? Mom, please, Victor muttered. Not now. Not now. Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. I refinanced part of my house to help pay your legal fees. Another wave of murmurs spread through the room. One guest looked between the three of them. So all of you planned this together. Not three people. Fine, Vanessa corrected bitterly. Four, the lawyer too. Robert Calloway was supposed to pressure Lorraine into signing away the condo. Everyone turned toward the back corner. But Robert was already gone. He had slipped out the moment the situation collapsed. Coward, Evelyn snapped. Then she turned toward Vanessa. This is your fault. You manipulated my son. Vanessa laughed harshly. Manipulated him. Victor told me his wife trusted him too much to ever question anything. The argument escalated quickly until several guests stepped between them before it became physical. What an embarrassment, someone muttered nearby. Charles Bennett folded his arms. Fine. Lorraine Hughes is one of the best financial controllers this company has ever had, he said firmly. After tonight, the only person whose position is secure is hers. Then he looked directly at Victor. You, on the other hand, should probably start updating your resume. Victor turned desperately from person to person, trying to regain control. You reacting like I committed a crime, he argued. I just wanted to be happy. 25 years is a long time. Patricia Monroe stepped forward immediately. And did you ever think about Lorraine? She asked coldly. Imagine spending 25 years married to someone selfish enough to do this. Several relatives nodded. Lorraine was loyal to you, Ethan Monroe added. And you were planning to humiliate her publicly while stealing from her behind her back. One younger guest lifted his phone. This is definitely going online. Several others agreed immediately. People deserve to know who he really is. For the first time all night, Victor looked genuinely afraid. Please, Don T, he said quickly. This is private. Vanessa let out a bitter laugh. Private? You tried to destroy your wife in front of 100 people. Slowly, the ballroom began emptying. First Lorraine's relatives left, then her coworkers, then the remaining guests. Fine. Most made sure Victor heard exactly what they thought of him before walking out. I'd never admit knowing you after tonight, one former colleague muttered. Another guest shook his head in disgust. You treated your wife like public entertainment. Less than an hour later, only a handful of people remained inside the ballroom. Victor, Evelyn, Vanessa, and a few exhausted hotel employees pretending not to watch. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. So what now? She asked flatly. Do you actually have any money left? Victor dragged both hands across his face. I spent most of it already. The party, the gifts, the loans. And how exactly are you planning to pay all that back? Vanessa demanded. Victor looked exhausted now. I don't know. Nearby, Evelyn slowly lowered herself into one of the ballroom chairs. I'm 84 years old, she whispered shakily. And now my finances are tied to this disaster. Victor moved toward her. Mom, we'll figure something out. But even he no longer sounded convinced. Then Vanessa picked up her purse. You know what? She said coldly. I'm done. She looked at Victor with complete disgust. You're not the man you pretended to be. Don T, call me again. Vanessa Cole said coldly as she picked up her purse. And forget the money you still owe me from the last 3 months? Consider it payment for this humiliating lesson. She stopped near the ballroom door and looked back once. Your wife is the strongest person in this room, she said. Too bad I only realized that tonight. Then she walked away, her heels echoing sharply across the marble floor. Victor and Evelyn were left standing alone among ruined centerpieces, spilled wine, and half-finished meals. For the first time all evening, neither of them seemed to know what to say. Finally, Evelyn spoke quietly. Victor, maybe it's not too late. Maybe we should go see Lorraine and ask for forgiveness. Victor stared blankly at the floor. No, he said after a long silence. You saw her tonight. She's done with us. Fine, then what are we supposed to do now? Victor rubbed both hands across his face. I honestly don't know. Meanwhile, Lorraine sat quietly in the back of a taxi watching Seattle's lights blur past the windows. Inside her purse were documents connected to 3 properties and accounts worth millions. But strangely, The strongest feeling inside her wasn't victory. It was relief. The older driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Beautiful night," he said casually. Lorraine smiled faintly. "Yes, it really is. Feels like something good happened." She looked back out at the city lights. "You could say my whole life changed tonight." 3 months later, Lorraine sat calmly inside a Seattle courtroom, watching the final collapse of the man she had spent 25 years beside. Victor looked older now, gray at the temples, tired eyes, a cheap suit replacing the expensive tailored ones he used to wear. The judge adjusted her glasses and reviewed the paperwork one final time. "The condo on Willow Creek Avenue, fine," she said firmly, "is confirmed as the separate premarital property of Lorraine Hughes and is not subject to division." Victor immediately stiffened. His attorney, no longer Robert Calloway, but a young court-appointed lawyer, already looked defeated. "The lake cabin is considered shared marital property and will be divided equally," the judge continued. "The same applies to the Lexus." "Your Honor," Victor's lawyer interrupted nervously. "My client relied on that vehicle for work." "Denied," the judge replied flatly. "The vehicle was purchased using marital funds." Lorraine remained silent beside Diane Mercer, who gave the slightest satisfied nod. Everything had unfolded exactly as expected. Then the judge continued. "It was also established that Mr. Victor Hughes concealed substantial financial liabilities from his spouse during the marriage." The courtroom grew quieter. $20,000 borrowed through Harbor National Bank, $15,000 through Summit Federal, an additional $8,000 personal loan. Victor stared at the floor. Total debt responsibility, $43,000. His lawyer stood quickly. "But those debts occurred during the marriage and were used exclusively for personal misconduct," the judge interrupted calmly. "Therefore, fine repayment responsibility remains solely with the petitioner." Victor looked physically ill. Then came the final ruling. This court officially dissolves the marriage between Victor Hughes and Lorraine Hughes. Mrs. Hughes retains ownership of the condo and associated personal accounts. No spousal support is assigned. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. 25 years? Finished. Outside the courthouse, Lorraine finally exhaled fully for what felt like the first time in months. "Lorraine," she turned. Victor hurried down the courthouse steps, clutching a folder awkwardly against his chest. "What do you want?" "Victor." He stopped several feet away. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I was selfish. You didn't deserve any of this." Lorraine studied him carefully. For a moment, she wondered whether it was genuine regret or simply the reality of consequences finally catching up with him. "I don't hate you," she said calmly. "We just very different people. You wanted comfort without responsibility. I built my life differently." Victor swallowed hard. "Could we still talk sometimes? Maybe eventually be friends?" Lorraine shook her head gently. "No. I think it's better if we let each other go completely." Then she turned and walked toward her car. Fine, a dark gray Audi she had purchased after receiving the inheritance from Scotland. Life moved on. And eventually, everyone ended up exactly where their choices led them. A month after the divorce, Victor lost his position at Northbridge Holdings. Fine, the anniversary video spread across social media faster than anyone expected, and Charles Bennett no longer wanted the company connected to the scandal. "You were good at your job, fine, Charles told him quietly during the termination meeting. But after everything that happened, the company can't ignore the damage anymore. After that, finding work became almost impossible. People recognized him everywhere. Someone had even turned the anniversary speech into viral clips online. Eventually, Victor began driving for a rideshare service, using an old Toyota Camry he bought back after the divorce. He moved into a small one-bedroom apartment with Evelyn after she was forced to sell her Bellevue home to cover legal fees and debts connected to Victor's failed scheme. Some nights, she sat quietly staring at the cracked apartment walls. "You should have listened to me earlier," she would murmur. "None of this would have happened if that woman never entered your life." Victor never argued anymore. By then, regret had become permanent. Vanessa Cole recovered quickly. Just 2 months after the scandal, she married a wealthy entrepreneur who owned several restaurants. The man had money, status, and very few questions. On social media, Vanessa posted glamorous wedding photos filled with flowers, jewelry, and champagne. Finally got my happy ending. Victor saw the photos one night and laughed bitterly to himself. Vanessa got exactly what she wanted in the end. It just wasn't him. Lorraine's life moved in the opposite direction. She relocated to the Scottsdale condo. Margaret Ellison had left her a quiet, sunlit home overlooking the desert mountains. For the first time in years, her life felt peaceful. Lorraine no longer wanted to work in corporate finance. Using part of the inheritance Margaret Ellison left her, she opened a small publishing house in Scottsdale, focused on translated European literature, something she had quietly dreamed about for years. When Lorraine resigned from Northbridge Holdings, Charles Bennett looked genuinely disappointed. "We don't want to lose you," he admitted. "Are you sure about this?" Lorraine smiled softly. "For the first time in a long time, I'm doing something that actually makes me happy." Her company stayed small by choice. A few talented translators. Limited editions. Quiet, meaningful work. One evening, Diane Mercer visited her condo and looked around the peaceful living room. "You seem different," Diane said. "Do you feel like you got revenge?" Lorraine shook her head gently. "No, I feel free. What happened wasn't revenge. I just stopped letting other people decide my worth." Later, they sat on the terrace drinking tea, while warm Arizona air moved through the night. "Do you regret those 25 years?" Diane asked. Lorraine thought for a moment. "No," she said quietly. "They taught me to trust myself, and to never ignore the truth when something feels wrong." A year later, Lorraine received a letter from Victor. He admitted she had been the best part of his life, and that he lost her because of his own greed and selfishness. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only wished her happiness. Lorraine folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. No anger, no sadness, just the memory of a life she had finally outgrown. That evening, she stepped onto the terrace with a cup of coffee and looked out over the glowing city lights. For the first time in many years, Lorraine Hughes felt completely at peace. So tell me honestly, do you think people like Victor truly regret hurting someone they loved? Fine, or do they only regret it after they lose everything? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story stayed with you tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for spending part of your evening with me. I hope wherever you are, life is treating you gently tonight.